أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم ولقد آتينا لقمان الحكمة أن اشكر لله ومن يشكر فإنما يشكر لنفسه ومن كفر فإن الله غني حميد وإذ قال لقمان لابنه وهو يعظه يا بني لا تشرك بالله إن الشرك لظلم عظيم ووصينا الإنسان بوالديه حملته أمه وهنا على وهن وفصاله في عامين أن اشكر لي ولوالديك إلي المصير رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقهوا قولي فالحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على سيد الأنبياء والمرسلين وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين ثم ما بعد. Once again, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. So everybody, today inshallah we're going to be trying to explore as many ayat as we can of this passage of Surah Luqman. The ayat under discussion are ayat number 12, this is Surah number 31, ayat number 12, all the way, hopefully we can get all the way to ayah number 19. For each of the ayahs, there are a set of lessons that I'd like to make sure that you guys understand, that you guys can benefit from. I will not go back and tell you how all of this is tied to Surah Al-Asr. Again, I want you to be able to figure that out yourselves. I've already given you the 4 conditions of saving ourselves from Surah Al-Asr. I've taught you how that was related to the ayah number 177 of Surah Al-Baqarah. It is the same connection here, but I won't explain that to you. It needs to now become self-explanatory to you. You need to think about that yourselves, okay? One of the benefits I hope that comes out of this class is that you guys become people who think a lot about the Quran as you read it. Right, that's something that I'd like you to get out of this. I don't just want you to listen to me talk about the Quran, but I want you to gain your own kind of thought process about Allah's book, at least at a 101, at a basic level, about the passages that we're going to be covering. The other bit of advice that I want to give you about what to do when you're done with this stuff is my sincere advice will be to try to memorize these passages in this order. Just memorize, little by little, one at a time, and kind of develop a relationship with at least these ayat, because they'll serve as a real great foundation for you, inshallah, throughout your youth life, inshallah ta'ala. Okay, so in any case, now we're looking at this amazing passage of the Quran in Surah Luqman, in which a father is going to give advice to his son. And this man, according to most scholars, is actually not a prophet. His name is Luqman. He's not a prophet. He's a very wise man. Allah has granted him wisdom. And what's the first thing to note here that I want you to think about is the fact that the Quran is only about 600 pages. And 600 pages in an English book is a lot, but 600 pages of the Mus'haf is actually very, very little. And the reason it's very, very little is because there's about 15 lines in a page at the most. 15 lines in a page. In an English textbook or whatever, you have like 30 lines. It's because it's smaller print, right? So it's a really small book. When you actually look at a translation of the Quran that's only English, it's actually pretty small. Now, the reason that's important to note is this is the last communication Allah decided to have with humanity. It's the last communication. As a matter of fact, if you compare the size of the Quran with the size of the Torah, the book given to Musa alayhi salam, or at least what we have of the Torah, it's at least 5 to 6 times bigger than the Quran. It's massive. It's huge. It's actually 5 books. They call it the 5 books of the Bible. Okay? Now, so the Quran is very brief. The point is, the Quran is very brief. Now, within the Quran, even if you read it a little bit, you probably notice that there's a lot of repetition, that the Quran repeats itself. So number one, it's brief, and on top of that, it's also repeating itself, which means the ideas presented in the Quran are actually very, very few. It's very, very few. Now that raises the question, if this is the last time Allah is directly communicating with us in the form of a message, right? This is the direct communication from Allah in the form of a message, and it's the last time. Why is it so brief? And why is it repeating itself? Because it's not the same as just writing a letter. It's not the same as writing a letter. This is actually something that Allah decided to call or describe as He was giving the Quran. He decided not just to call it a revelation, a wahi, He also decided to call it allama al-Quran. He taught the Quran, a teaching. This is a teaching. And a message or a letter or an email or back in the day a fax or whatever, that's not the same as a teaching. The purpose of a teaching is to make sure you get it. right? It's to make sure not just that a message is delivered, but rather you understand it. Now, for a teacher, you guys know this already, for a good teacher, is there a lot of repetition in his class? In a good teacher's class? Absolutely. There's a lot of review. There's a lot of examples. If you don't understand the first time the teacher gives an example, he gives you another example. Then he gives you another example. So he repeats himself in like a number of different ways. So hopefully if, version 1 didn't hit you, or the first type of example didn't hit you, the second one might, the third one might, something might click. And you say, oh, okay, now I get it, now I get it. Like the first 3 problems you tried to solve, you're confused. The fourth one, he came at it from a different angle, and you're like, oh, okay, now I get it. I can solve all of them now. That ever happened to you in a class? Right? So the idea of the Quran is that this repetition is supposed to assist you in learning certain concepts. Now, how many believers have there been since Adam alayhi salam? Countless. And how many fathers have given advice to their sons? Countless. Throughout human history, throughout all societies. I mean, that's an infinite number of people that have talked to their sons. And this is a very private kind of conversation. Of course, Allah knows all of those conversations. And as a matter of fact, we're talking about this wise man, Luqman, and he's talking to his young son. You think this is the only conversation he had with his young son? No, I'm sure he had conversations throughout his life. And if you transcribe all of the conversations he had with his son, and transcribe every conversation every father has had with every son, that is an endless number of pages, isn't it? And so Allah decides, of all of those billions of pages of advice from a father to a son, this one brief set of advice is so valuable that it should become part of the last message to humanity. So from now until the Day of Judgment, people should review this advice and understand that this is of really serious value. So my take on the Quran is that when you find something in the Quran that's of historical nature, like Allah is talking about a conversation between a father and a son, that's actually, I take a step back and say, whoa, this is pretty amazing. Because this happens a lot. I give advice to my kids. My dad gave me advice. Ibrahim alayhi salam gave his children advice. And by the way, a lot of the people who gave their children advice, a lot of those people were prophets. So you would think every time Allah would quote someone in the Quran, He would quote who? He'd quote prophets. But He decided to quote Luqman because his advice was that epic. It was that comprehensive. It's a few words. It's from ayah number 12 to ayah number 19. And even in between of those 2 ayat, there's actually an interjection. An interjection means that Allah was quoting someone and He stopped quoting them and started making some comments of His own and then back to the quote. Let me say that again. Allah is quoting someone in between quotes, and in the middle of quoting someone, He stops quoting them and then He starts adding some of His own commentary and then goes, let's go back to the quote. He does that. This is kind of an interjection. That's going to happen in this discussion. Which is amazing because now it's as though Allah Azza wa Jalla is also so moved by this advice that halfway through He had to comment Himself. He commented Himself. And we'll notice that inshallah in the middle of this conversation. Inshallah ta'ala. Okay? So now the first thing. وَلَقَدْ آتَيْنَا لُقْمَانَ الْحِكْمَةِ. We had certainly given Luqman wisdom. We had certainly given Luqman wisdom. You know who Luqman is? Most people don't know. Luqman is actually a very famous person in Arab history. Even the people who didn't believe in Islam, they were before Islam, they believed that this man lived some time ago. He was from the Arab lands, and he was a wise person. And they used to, you know how you have like proverbs and idioms and sayings, like wise sayings and things like that? They used to attribute a lot of wise sayings to Luqman. So people came to the Prophet ﷺ and said, well, you're a messenger. I mean, you receive a message from God. Well, you think like people like Luqman, they didn't have any wisdom? And Allah did something remarkable, right? He started answering the people's question with this passage saying, actually, yes, Luqman, I did give him wisdom. He wasn't just wise on his own. آتَيْنَا لُقْمَانَ الْحِكْمَةِ. We gave Luqman wisdom. In other words, Allah took someone that they looked up to already and didn't say, no, he wasn't a prophet, so forget about him. Don't listen to anything he has to say. No, actually, he had some good things to say too. So good, in fact, that I make them a part of the Quran. The lesson we learn from that is we don't dismiss people just because they're not Muslim, or just because they're not the people we want people to listen to. He's before Islam. Obviously, he's a believer. He's a Muslim. Now we know. And the mushrikun didn't even know that he believed in one God and all of these things. We don't know. And actually, most people say that he lived at a time between prophets. In other words, he didn't have a prophet himself to follow and things like that. He just came to certain conclusions because Allah had given him wisdom. Subhanallah. So that what that means is that there are people that have wisdom that aren't, that may not have been Muslim. And they may have something good to say. And we don't just dismiss what they say just because they're not Muslim. I was standing, I took my kids on a trip to Washington, D.C., and we were standing by the Lincoln Memorial. And think what you will of Lincoln, he's a contentious figure in American history, I know that. But you're standing in the Lincoln Memorial, and I'm not impressed with the giant statue thing that starts speaking at the night of the museum or whatever. I'm talking about the speech that's engraved on the side. Right, the speech, some of his words are engraved on the side. And you start standing there and reading those words, and I was literally moved to tears. It's an incredible speech. It is a remarkable work of art, not the engraving, the words themselves. I appreciate the wisdom in them. I think it's remarkable. I think, for example, one of my friends who's doing his PhD at the University of North Carolina, he's Muslim, of course. His PhD is on Einstein, on Einstein's writings, and not on Einstein's writings that have to do with science. When you guys think of Einstein, you think of E equals mc squared, or you think of a weird-looking guy that shows up in cartoons every once in a while or whatever. But Einstein, of course, one of the greatest scientific minds of our time, right? The father of modern physics, even quantum mechanics and all of it. But before all of this, he actually wrote a lot about God. Einstein actually used to think a lot about God. And he wrote a number of papers. And the thesis that my friend wrote, he just finished and got approved too, was that his writings about God sound like an explanation of Surah Al-Ikhlas, قُلْ هُوَ اللَّهُ أَحَدٌ اللَّهُ الصَّمَدُ لَمْ يَلِدْ وَلَمْ يُولَدْ وَلَمْ يَكُنْ لَهُ كُفُوًا أَحَدٌ. And it's actually been discovered that he had a number of copies of translations of the Quran in his library, and he's actually making a connection between his ideas of God and his influence from Islam. Something nobody talks about. And actually his professors, when you present your PhD paper, there are like a panel of professors whose job is to tear you apart, to rip you to shreds. That's what their job is. And they were all blown away by his thesis. Like, you would think he's going to talk about crazy. The Quran inspired Einstein? You must be crazy. Actually, they were blown away and they're really impressed. And he's getting all kinds of accolades for his paper. It's nuts. But you know what? Whose wisdom is he impressed by? Not only Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's wisdom, whose words was he moved by to the point where he'd spend 6-7 years of his life doing a PhD? Einstein. In other words, wisdom can be found outside of, Muslim scholars or Muslim speakers or just the people who are Muslim themselves. Allah grants wisdom to whoever He wills. And they're in their own exploration. They're doing their own study. They're doing their own, and may Allah, Allah will judge them how He will. We can't say. And I'll repeat. Somebody asked a question: how are people going to be judged that aren't Muslim? This is actually the easy answer is every non-Muslim will go to hell. I personally, in all good conscience, I don't care how controversial this sounds to somebody else, I, in good conscience, after all the Quran I've tried to study and all the Seerah I've tried to study, cannot come to that conclusion. That is not my conclusion about people who are not Muslim. My conclusion is, I don't know. My conclusion is, Allah Azza wa Jalla has declared certain things that He does not accept. Inna dina inda Allahi al-Islam. The only religion acceptable with Allah is absolute submission. It's Islam. But at the end of the day, what a person died with, what they had in their heart, and the difference between what they had in their heart and what they had on their tongue, I will never know. I'm just never going to know. I'm actually much moved by the prime example of the king of Abyssinia. The king of Abyssinia who lived at the time of the Prophet ﷺ, who accepted Islam quietly. Like his you could say minions, you get the wrong idea again, but the people in his kingdom and the people around him, his ministers, his generals or whatever, they didn't actually have an idea that he's become Muslim. And actually, if he declared that he's become Muslim, there would have been an uproar in the kingdom because the king's become blasphemous, because at the time, religion and politics were all meshed together. And actually, that's still the case. When you have modern elections, aren't there some people that say, oh, wait, he's running in the elections? Isn't he a Muslim? Or isn't he a Mormon? Isn't he Jewish? A Jew is going to be president of the United States? Is that conversation does it ever happen? So religion and politics are complicated, right? So he couldn't have just come out and said, I've become a Muslim. But Allah gave revelation to the Prophet ﷺ that he had actually died on Islam. And they prayed an absentee janazah for him. In other words, Allah, by revelation, told us about that king, that he's actually died on Islam. But if you look at the official record of the kingdom, what's it going to say? He died a Christian. Oh, that in and of itself is a lesson that unless, in the case of the Prophet ﷺ, Allah gave him revelation and let him know that this person actually died on Islam. But how many people are there who believe in one God, who are searching for the truth, who don't do any shirk, who die that way, and we have no idea. We just have no idea. And maybe the only reason they stayed away from Islam, the only reason, is Muslims. I'll say that again. Maybe some people, the only reason they weren't interested in Islam is because they met a Muslim. They're like, no, that can't be right. That can't be the right religion. And that's actually a dua in the Quran. لا تجعلنا فتنة للذين كفروا. Don't make us a fitna, a trial for those who disbelieve. Meaning, don't make us such a bad example that people look at us and they don't want nothing to do with us. And that's the reason they never accepted Islam. But that doesn't mean they don't come to Allah with a clean heart. We don't know. We just don't know. Just like we don't get to say, I'm going to heaven, you're going to heaven, you're going to Jannah. Alhamdulillah, thank God we have our tickets. We don't. We don't have our tickets. So if we can't even speak about ourselves, how is it that it's so easy for you and me to speak about someone else? It's not. So in any case, let's come back to Luqman. Allah had given him what? Wisdom. Now, when you think of wisdom, what kinds of ideas come in your head? Like, oh, this person is wise. I know you're teenagers, you don't really think about wisdom too much, but if you do, what thoughts come in your head? Any ideas? Huh?
He has experience.
Someone with a lot of experience. Someone who says really deep things, like this, you say them and you want to tweet them and pretend like they're your own quote. Like people who say epic, profound things, they're wise, right? They speak almost in poetic language, or they speak in really big vocabulary. Like we think of someone wise as someone really knowledgeable, or someone really old who's experienced life, or someone who says just really super profound things, and you hear them and you're like, whoa, I don't even know what you said, but that was deep, man. Like that sort of thing, So we have this kind of fuzzy idea of what wisdom means. One of the interesting things about Arabic and Arab culture, ancient Arab culture, is that they loved simplifying things. They had a love of simplifying things. And they had this really simple, almost silly definition of wisdom, and I want to share that with you. Their definition of wisdom was, when you have correct knowledge, and you act on it, there are two parts to it, beneficial or correct knowledge, and the part two, that you act on it. When those two things come together, that actually means that you have wisdom. Now let's put that to the test a little bit. What do they mean by that? Here's correct knowledge. Fire burns. I hope you understand that that is correct knowledge. You acting on it means you did not stick your hand in the fire. Young man, you have acted wisely. You chose wisely, young samurai. You did not stick your hand in the fire. That is because you acted on the knowledge that you have. Okay, let's take it a step further. Smoking can lead to all kinds of lung problems, eventually even lung cancer. It's knowledge. As a result of that knowledge, what do you decide to do? Not smoke. That decision that you made is you acting wisely. Speeding on a highway recklessly can cause a crash. You can kill yourself, your friends, and other innocent people that have nothing to do with your ridiculousness. It's pretty good knowledge. Not you having a BMW M5 or having, another kind of, maybe a rice burner or whatever it is, and you not actually crossing the 100-mile-an-hour limit and not cutting through cars and thinking that you can pass by that truck even though it's about to take the exit and cut through, you not making that decision is a wise decision. Now, the simple question is it the case that a lot of times people actually have correct knowledge but don't act on it? Does that ever happen? Sure. Wisdom is when you have the correct knowledge and you have the sense and the strength of judgment, the right kind of calibration up here, that you actually make the right judgment. You understand? That's wisdom. So wisdom is something practical. It's not something foo-foo and fuzzy and abstract. It's not an epic quote or whatever. It's practical. To the Arabs, it's practical. Okay? Now, having said that, وَلَقَدْ آتَيْنَا لُقْمَانَ الْحِكْمَةَ, we had given Luqman wisdom, which means Luqman has two things. On the one hand, he's got knowledge. And on the other, whatever knowledge he has, he puts it to action. It somehow changes the way he thinks, the way he decides something, the way he acts out on that knowledge. It is determined by what he knows. Okay. This is also important for you guys because really at the end of the day, for what is most demanded or what is most appreciated about youth in the Quran is actually wisdom. It's not knowledge. You guys know that when you're at this age, memorizing is easier, studying is easier, retaining is easier, taking tests is easier. As a matter of fact, if I was to go back to high school now and I'd sit in the same physics class as you do or the same math class as you do, I would not nearly do as well as you're doing. I wouldn't. You know why? Because I'm not in student mode anymore. My mind isn't as sharp as it was when I was a teen. There's a certain age where knowledge is easily acquired. But knowledge is easily acquired at an early age. What is acquired over time? Wisdom takes time. Right? So you know a lot, but you don't really know how to use it yet. Like you have kids that are like 10 years old, but they've memorized the whole Quran. Right? They memorized the whole Quran. But do they have the wisdom to understand what it means yet? And as a matter of fact, even if they memorize the entire translation, do they really internalize what it means yet? No, they don't have the capacity to do that yet. Wisdom hasn't settled in yet. So now Luqman has been given wisdom. And what is the climax of all of his wisdom? Check this out. Anishkur lillah. Be grateful to Allah. Be grateful to Allah. And here, because I'm a student of the Arabic language and in the Quran, there's a lot of things. The way I can put this easily to you guys is, you know how there's programming code, there's source code when you have a game or like an app. This is the front end, this is what you see, and there's a back end, there's a lot of code behind it. And sometimes there's some pretty epic things in the code that you don't see on the front end. There's a lot of that is in the Arabic language. When you study the Arabic language, there's something you see in translation, but there's something going on in the technical side of the Arabic that gives you a lot of benefits. Like a lot of meanings come out of it and you don't even know what happened. Right? So I don't want to get technical with you, but I do want to tell you that when he says, Allah says, we gave him wisdom, he didn't say we gave him wisdom to be grateful to Allah. That's not how I translated it. He gave him wisdom to be grateful. Rather, he gave him wisdom, be grateful to Allah. Now there's a difference between saying he gave him the wisdom to be grateful and saying he gave him wisdom, quote, be grateful. Now when you say be grateful, what kind of language is that? That's a command, isn't it? That's a command. Meaning Luqman understood that being grateful is actually obligatory. It's not just something nice to do. It's not just something you should do every once in a while. You kind of sort of should do it. He realized that this is something he must do. That's captured inside Anishkur lillah. A lot of English translations, like some of the translations you guys have, can you read to me what they say in the translation? We gave Luqman wisdom. Can you read it out to me out loud? Look, see, it says, saying, be grateful to Allah. That's still a decent translation. Because at least he kept what words? Be grateful. Be grateful. It's inside quotes. Okay? Now, this idea of him having to be grateful, what in the world does that mean? It's actually, there's a world of wisdom inside that reality. And I need you to understand it. There's two meanings of being grateful, or anishkur lillah. One of them is in the translation, be grateful to Allah. Here's the second meaning, be grateful for Allah's sake. I'll say that again, be grateful to Allah. And the second one, be grateful for Allah's sake. Okay? Because of Allah. You can say be grateful because of Allah. Or for Allah's sake. Now what do these two things mean? Luqman understood at the end of all of the wisdom that Allah had given him that he has to be positive. At the end of the day, being grateful, you can think of it in simple language as being the same as being positive. You're in a bad situation. You're missing your flight. You wanted to go on vacation, you're missing your flight. You're sitting at the airport for 5 hours. Come on, another delay, another 2 hours. Oh God, now they're saying the flight's canceled. Forget, this is so ridiculous. Now you're all upset and agitated and your mother comes to you and says, you know what, we should be grateful that at least we're together. Mom, yeah, thank God I'm together with all of you. I was looking forward to the fact that I was sitting in 27F and the rest of you were in 19D and 19E. But no, thank God that we missed a flight. Thank God that we've been sitting here on this uncomfortable chair. Thank God that the Dunkin' Donuts is closed. Thank God that, we had to go through security and I got the special treatment because my socks kept beeping or whatever, In other words, were you positive? No. At the end of his life, and at the end of all of the life experiences that he's had, he realized that being grateful is the ultimate wisdom. That's the ultimate wisdom. In other words, whatever experiences you and I have in life, the wise thing to do is to understand what is something I can be grateful about even in this crazy situation, even in this bad situation. Is there something I can be grateful for? Okay. I'm going to tell you a couple of quick stories here. One of my closest friends and a family member too, used to be Hindu, and he's really intelligent. He went to one of the highest, leading high schools in New York City. He had to actually take a couple of trains and travel an hour and a half to get to his high school in Stuyvesant, because he lived on Long Island and had to go into New York City, which is a hijrah basically. It's a migration every day. But he got into this elite school, and he had high scores, and he's got a full ride, and his parents really want him to be a doctor, and he's applied to med school, and he's got no doubt in his head that he's getting in, no doubt whatsoever. And guess what happens? Every school he applies to, he gets rejected, and he's in serious depression. What am I going to do? What am I going to do? What am I going to do? Everything I've done so far, I took AP Bio, AP Chemistry. I've been doing extra studies for med school for my entire life. I had my entire life planned out. My parents had my entire life planned out. All of their expectations of me are shattered. All of the expectations of myself are shattered. He falls back and goes into serious depression and decides, forget it. I'll at least do something else. He goes to another school in New York, Stony Brook University, and decides to do programming instead. And first couple of years you don't really do much in college. You take like political science and music 101, or like you take all these like weird courses. But anyway, so he's taking these courses and he makes some friends that are Muslim. And they start hanging out with him. And they just start chilling. They didn't have a frat house, but you could call it that. Okay, they had a Muslim, the Muslim youth of MSA had a house to themselves, the guys that used to chill in on campus. And he's just hanging out with them all the time. And through that, actually, he became Muslim. And not only did he become Muslim, a lot of good came from him as a result of him becoming Muslim. A lot of service, alhamdulillah, to the ummah. But he looks back to those days and realizes, one of the things I'm most grateful for is not getting into med school. Would he have had that attitude at the time? But no, he has the wisdom now to understand that even that is something he should have been grateful for. Had he become a successful doctor, he would have stayed in shirk his entire life. But Allah brought him to the greatest gift of all, to Islam, because of not being able to get into med school. That's the path Allah chose for him. You understand? So there are sometimes, Allah will put you through certain experiences in life, and you're gonna have a hard time thinking, why in the world should I be grateful for this? But actually, that is the ultimate wisdom, being grateful. Being grateful for whatever happens. Whatever happens. This is particularly difficult for your generation. I'm not blaming you guys, but in your generation, there is an unusual amount of luxury and convenience. You guys have a lot of what you want at the tip of your fingers, literally. You can order things online, you can download things, you have the devices to do so, you have the constant connections to do so, and you've become used to that kind of convenience. You're accustomed to it. So for the 1 hour flight that you're taking where your phone is on airplane mode, you're really agitated that you can't check your Facebook status. You're really annoyed that you can't make some phone calls. You're really upset that you didn't bring your charger and your iPad is already dead and you can no longer smash your bird into buildings. So you're so used to having stuff at your fingertips all the time that, as a matter of fact, when I asked you guys to turn the phones off right now, some of you are probably pretty peeved about that. Seriously, and your hands are itchy right now because you're not getting to do whatever game it is that you're so addicted to. You're not getting to do it, And this is actually this is not just a problem of some games or some handheld devices or whatever. This is a much bigger problem. We're used to getting things and we're starting to think that we're entitled to them, that we actually deserve them. And so the moment even a little bit of that is taken away from us, we lose it. We just absolutely lose it. So if you, for example, have to share your room with a sibling for a night because there's a flood in the other bathroom or they're changing the carpet or whatever, there's going to be, you're going to throw a fit. Are you serious? She's going to sit down, she's going to lie down in my bed? I have to share my, come on. Yeah, give her your clothes, okay? Her clothes are still in laundry. She can wear your clothes to school. Are you serious? Don't wear that one. Like, you have those conversations with your sibling? Don't wear that one. That's not, no, Mom said I could do it. In other words, you have stuff that's yours, it's yours, it's yours, it's yours, and you can't give it to anybody else. Nobody else can have my stuff. Why are you looking at my stuff? Why are you touching my stuff? Mine, 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 mine. You're like that bird in Finding Nemo. Mine, mine, mine. Like that's you know. That, you know, the wisdom that's being taught here. The wisdom that's being taught here. When are you grateful? You know when you're grateful? When you get something that you didn't deserve. Please remember that. You're grateful when you get something that you didn't deserve. This is really, really important. In order for you and I to be grateful, we have to internalize something. We have to remember something always and every day at every moment. That whatever you and I have, the clothes that we're wearing, the devices that we're so proud of, the cars that we're driving in, the homes that we have, the school that we go to, none of it is actually something we deserve. This is all actually given to us despite the fact that we do not deserve it. As a matter of fact, there is a young man or a young woman your age, if not just as intelligent, more intelligent than you, that's sitting out under a tree somewhere, homeless. That hasn't had real food to eat, not because they're fasting, because they have no real food to eat. And there's no logical explanation for why you deserve to live in a comfortable home and get to change the air conditioning in your house and have all kinds of luxuries that you don't appreciate, and they don't. There is no logical explanation. One explanation, though, is you certainly don't deserve, and I don't deserve, what we have. We do not deserve it. The problem, though, is when you constantly keep getting something, you know what you start, in the back of your head, you start thinking? You deserve it. You deserve it. And let me prove to you that we start thinking we deserve it. The moment you complain, you know what complaints are a proof of? Complaints are a proof that you thought you deserved something. Isn't that true? When you deserve something and you didn't get it, then obviously you're going to what? Complain. If you didn't deserve it, and you never got it, well, there's no reason to complain, because it wasn't yours, and you didn't deserve it either. No reason for you to complain. In other words, then all the things that you and I enjoy in life, we have to internalize the fact that they're not ours, that they do not belong to us, that they are gifts from Allah, and I can tell you very clearly that once you develop that attitude, you are going to lead a positive life. You're going to be very happy in life. And if you don't develop that attitude, you, my friend, are going to live a really miserable life. You're going to be unhappy your entire life. You're never going to be happy because you're constantly going to think you deserve better, you deserve better, you deserve better. Nothing's good enough for you. Nothing impresses you. And that's what I call the scariest disorder that has afflicted so many young people, the whatever disease, where nothing ever makes you happy. You get the best things in life and you look at them and you say, whatever. It's just the most poisonous word I've ever heard is whatever. I can't stand that word. I can't stand it, you know. Your parents are telling you, I've done so much for you. I do this for you. And that, but Mom, I really want to go on that trip. No, you can't go on that trip. You never let me do anything. What do you mean I never let you do anything? I do this for you and that. Yeah, whatever. You ever had those conversations? I'm sure you haven't, because you guys are angels over here. You guys have never had any conversation like that. We're reading the Quran, and I'm telling you, I just want to just tell you what the book says, and we just kind of talk about it in an abstract sort of way. This is talking about you and me. This is practical. Be grateful. Be grateful. Don't just be grateful. By the way, it does not say only be grateful to Allah. That's the other important thing. It says be grateful to Allah. And there's an important reason why the word only is not used. Some people say we can only be grateful to Allah. I'm not. Your parents are trying to tell you, look what I'm trying to help you. No, no, no. Or what do you want me to thank you? I should only thank Allah. Okay? Allah is the only one we should thank. The Quran never says that. As a matter of fact, the Quran tells us to be grateful to people. And to be grateful to teachers. To be especially to parents. Being grateful is not only for Allah. Being grateful is not only for Allah, not in the Quran. Anishkurli wali walidayk, it's actually coming a little bit later on. Be grateful to me and be grateful to both of your parents. You're supposed to be grateful to a teacher, grateful to a friend, grateful to a stranger who helped you on the side of a road, grateful to a classmate who helped you finish the homework assignment. You know? Grateful to someone who advised you, grateful to someone who helped you out in times of need. You're supposed to be grateful to people too. But you will never learn to be grateful if not for Allah. Now what does that mean? That means that you understand that every one of the people that you are grateful to, they're actually a gift of Allah to you. Your friends are a gift of Allah to you. Your parents are a gift of Allah to you. Your siblings, I know it's hard to believe, but they're also a gift of Allah to you. And you might think you're the first sibling that had a rivalry, or you don't get along with your sibling, and that's just unique to you. Actually, the Quran talks about the first murder in humanity that happened between siblings. Yeesh. So I'm not trying to say you're not that bad. Things haven't gotten that far yet, though I've thought about it multiple times. And may have said it. Who'll kill you? And may have said it. But, you know, rivalry is a real thing. It's a real thing. I'm not denying it. But this attitude is for the wise. To be grateful for all things. To be grateful for all the people in our life. This is anishkur lillah. And by the way, if you're grateful, usually when you're grateful, who does that help? Someone else. Meaning when you say thank you to someone, when you send a present to someone, when you send a card to someone, it is your gesture for someone else. But in this ayah, وَمَنْ يَشْكُرْ فَإِنَّمَا وَمَنْ شَكَرَ وَمَنْ يَشْكُرْ فَإِنَّمَا يَشْكُرُ لِنَفْسِهِ. Whoever is grateful is only actually truly grateful for his own benefit. Who is it benefiting? You. You're becoming a happier person. You're becoming a more satisfied person. You're making the most of what you have in your life. You're not constantly looking at what you didn't get or what you don't have or what you could have had. You're actually taking advantage of what you do have. The glass is never half empty for you. It's always half full for you. You're positive. Being grateful is the same as being positive. You're only helping yourself. You know there's modern psychology about this? There are TED Talks that are done about this. That if you become grateful, you'll lead a happier life. They're discovering this now, and it's so epic that there's a TED Talk about it, and people are like, yay, that's amazing. I never thought about it like that. And yet, Allah has given us that 1400 years ago. Listen, if you're grateful, it's only going to help you. There's no TED Talk about this ayah. You know, there's no appreciation and accolade about this ayah, but this powerful reality is there. It's just there. You know, and we have to internalize, this is one of the first and foremost things about believing in Allah, by the way. Believing in Allah is not just, I believe there's a God, and this is what I'm going to end with, so you guys think about this, okay? When we say we believe in Allah, it's not just about we believe in an invisible power that does everything, that created the universe, that created us, that is controlling all things. That's not enough. Believing in Allah actually leads to certain kinds of attitudes. Believing in Allah leads to what? Attitudes. And the first attitude that the Quran talks about, that believing in Allah leads to, is gratefulness. You become positive. You become someone who's appreciative. You don't become apathetic. Do you know what apathetic means? You don't care. You're not a person who doesn't care. You never say, I don't care. Whatever. You're not that kind of person. You're always appreciating things around you. You always see value in things around you. You always see value in people around you. You don't make fun or ridicule or undermine other people. Your friends at school might make fun of other people. You don't, because you appreciate all people. You appreciate the good in them. You see how when people make fun of others, what do they make fun of? They're so fat, they're so skinny, they're so short, they're so weird, they have an accent, look at their teeth, look at their nose, look at this, look at how they're dressed. Isn't that what they make fun of? You know, look at the clothes they're wearing. Look at the book bag they have. Look at the brand of shoes they're wearing. Where'd you get those? Walmart? You know? And all of these things is as though this person should feel, well, I'm so short. I should complain about that. I'm so skinny. I should be sad about that. I have shoes from Walmart. I should be depressed about that. In other words, we're instilling into people how they should be grateful or ungrateful? Ungrateful. Ungrateful. Everyone, we're supposed to not just be grateful ourselves, we should instill gratitude in other people. And by the way, the opposite of gratitude is what word? Gratitude versus? No. Ingratitude. It's very difficult, I know. Gratitude versus what? You know what the Arabic word for ingratitude is? Now this is the crazy part. The Arabic word for ingratitude is kufr. The Arabic word for ingratitude is what? Kufr. Does anyone know what the other meaning of kufr is? Disbelief. So to the Arabs, disbelief and ingratitude are one and the same. There's not even a difference to them. Someone who's not grateful might as well not even be a believer. The first thing that happens as a result of you being a believer is you become grateful, you become positive. This is why the first words of the Quran are what? Fatiha, how does it begin? Alhamdulillah. Words of gratitude. Praise and gratitude belongs to Allah. It's the first lesson you learn in the Quran. First lesson. You don't learn that one lesson, you don't learn anything. You don't know anything. So you and I have to internalize this. There are people who are very knowledgeable in Islam and they don't even know this. And even if they know it, they don't practice it. And so they have knowledge, but they don't have what? Wisdom. And this is something we need to remind ourselves of. Even if we have a lot of knowledge, there are still people that are super knowledgeable, but they're always complaining anyway. How can you be knowledgeable about Islam and be complaining? Those two things can't come together. They don't work together. The more knowledgeable we get in this deen, we're supposed to get wiser. And the wiser we get, what are we supposed to do more of? Gratefulness. That's what's supposed to happen. So with that, inshallah ta'ala, we'll conclude our first conversation about these ayat. Barakallahu li wa lakum. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.